Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again for another show. Hope you are doing well on this Thursday. In today's show, the Christmas Eve debacle, why it's caused such a fuss, and rightly so. Also, Conor Gallagher, his contract situation, why he may still leave Chelsea in January, as ridiculous as that sounds given his current form. Then Jadon Sancho being linked to Chelsea, and Pochettino's involvement in the club's transfer strategy. Before we get into any of that good stuff, please hit that like button, really does help the show out. Hit the subscribe button, turn those notifications on so you don't miss any of the content. I also want to say a massive thank you to those who listen via the podcast, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, also part of the Sports Social Podcast Network. It was quite cool to receive some data earlier this week that spoke about and sort of illustrated the international reach of the show. So if you are listening in any of those places, be that India, Spain, it was amazing to get some of that data, to be honest, and really humbling to see how many people listen to the show. So thank you for your support. But let's get into it. Firstly, with this Christmas Eve debacle, there's kind of no way around it. It is crazy. It feels like stepping across another line, but we're going to get into all of that, some people's opinions, and then also the supporters' trust statement, and hopefully a chance to reverse this decision. So firstly, let's go through Chelsea's confirmed December schedule in the Premier League. Of course, this may involve a Carabao Cup quarter-final if Chelsea do make it through against Blackburn next week. But here it is. So Sunday the 3rd, Brighton at home, that's a 2 p.m. kickoff. Wednesday the 6th, Man United away, that's an 8:15 p.m. kickoff being broadcast on Amazon Prime. Sunday the 10th, Everton away, another 2 p.m. kickoff. Saturday the 16th, Sheffield United at home, a classic 3 p.m. kickoff. Then the controversial one, Sunday the 24th, Wolves away, 1 p.m. kickoff on Sky Sports. Wednesday the 27th, Crystal Palace, 7:30 p.m. That's at home and on Amazon Prime. And finally, Saturday the 30th, Luton away, 12:30 p.m. kickoff on TNT Sports. How crazy this is. The last time there was a game, a Premier League fixture on Christmas Eve, I wasn't even born in 1995. So that's how long it's been. And let's go through some of the reaction that I do agree with and I think make important points here. Colin Miller, who is a journalist for the Mirror, says Premier League football hasn't needed Christmas Eve football in 28 years. Why does it now? Were any match-going fans, players or coaches for whom the move is universally unpopular consulted? Were club staff, stewards, caterers, security? Football only ever follows the money. Then Dom Russo, who is very high up within the Chelsea Supporters Trust, he's vice chair, says there has been no consultation with supporters and it will force people to cancel Christmas plans with families. This is a spit in the face of all supporters regardless of your club. Then Stamford Chidge, the podfather himself, the issue around moving a fixture to Xmas Eve is not just about inconveniencing supporters. We clearly have a choice to go or not. For me, it's more evidence that Sky and Premier League continue to treat match-going supporters with contempt and don't give a damn about it. I completely agree with all that, and especially from a travel point of view, if you don't live in the UK, the train situation around Christmas is always bad. That's not even with strikes, but it is something that generally you try to avoid if you can. That's even with regular train journeys, not even the most the longest distance ones, but this, London to the Midlands to Wolverhampton isn't the most arduous journey you're going to do, but in terms of that time of the year, it is awkward. And I think Chelsea, you've pointed this out, there's only like 2 direct journeys available, and that's not even considering the potential timetable changes that could happen before then, and also potential strikes that happened last year and that could be likely at that time of the year anyway. So it's a nightmare. And yeah, sure, it is optional whether you go to the game or not. If you are someone that likes to go to a lot of away games and you know the struggles of getting tickets and the points part of that come with buying tickets, missing out can be a little bit detrimental. But I'd like to think that if this does go forward, there'd be enough fans who just turn around and go, no, not for me, I'm not going. And then the empty seats on camera speak volumes to the broadcasters and to the Premier League that this is an awful decision. Because it just is. And all the nonsense we hear and the nice cliches and the way these broadcasters... I more get annoyed with the broadcasters, maybe people within it, like high-profile pundits who will go on rants and get on their high horse about certain issues, but will stay absolutely silent about this. And I think it's obvious why, because they get employed and in some cases get paid, I'm sure, very favourably by these broadcasters. But this is a serious issue. The treating of supporters who are treated, in my opinion, and this is, this is not to say that all these people who work in these organisations, be that presenters, pundits, producers, all don't care about football fans. That's obviously a silly sentiment, a silly thing for me to say, and I don't believe that. But the actions of the governing bodies of this game and the broadcasters speak very differently to those who pay hard-earned money to support the club. It speaks to contempt. It speaks to a belief and almost an attitude towards supporters, the match-going supporters, that they are just background scenery. They are just extras in a movie, which is insulting and goes against everything we believe in supporting a football club. And it feels more and more like that, especially when you see kickoff times, the late scheduling, the late TV scheduling announcements that continue to happen. I know the FSA continues to bring out statements about how ludicrous it is that in recent times we still have late announcements, which obviously messes with people's schedules. It's a nonsense. And this feels like, this is not a new issue, but this feels like we're going into a different level. And I think Chelsea, you've also pointed out, as others may be concerned by, Christmas Day football and the push for that in the future, and the push for even more inconvenient kickoff times. And in the long term, financially, with the cost of travel, with the cost of tickets, with the cost of potential accommodation if you're going quite far, petrol if you're driving up and down from these games, empty stadiums, what is that going to mean for broadcasters? How is that going to be appealing to broadcasters and the finances? I just think this is a step too far. And my hope is with this, Chelsea Supporters Trust released this statement in terms of potential meeting to maybe reverse this choice. So let's go through what they said in their statement. It is totally unacceptable that Wolves Chelsea has been scheduled for Christmas Eve. Since rumours began to circulate on this issue, the Supporters Trust has been clear that selecting this kickoff time will place another hurdle in the way of many match-going supporters. Not only could this lead to staffing issues at Molineux, but as we've already said, holiday transport timetables will further inconvenience supporters. On Tuesday, the 24th of October, we requested an urgent meeting with the relevant decision makers within the Premier League. We expect that this meeting will be held very soon, alongside the Wolves 1877 Trust and the Football Supporters Association. The Supporters Trust will formally request that the Premier League properly consults supporters on this issue and that they reverse this decision. We will provide a further update to CST members in due course. Fingers crossed, but it's a bit like the Super League. Why did it get to this point? Even if the decision does get reversed, which is the right course of action and would be a win for supporters, it's a small win because in other ways supporters will be screwed throughout the season, and that's the shame of it. And it's the broadcast debate and where that's going and the impact on match-going supporters is a broader and more complex discussion to be had that isn't just Chelsea-based, obviously. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, but this is a step too far. And given what Christmas Eve means to many people and how tricky it is to travel up and down the country, for the players too, for the demands on them at this time of the year. I speak a lot about the demands on elite footballers being ridiculous at this point, and that's maybe why we see, especially at Chelsea, so many injuries to players now breaking down. It's even more of a nonsense. So that's my feelings. Let me know yours in the comments below. So let's move on to some transfer news. The Athletic did this piece breaking down the contract situations at all the Premier League clubs. So this is what they had to say about Chelsea. Only 3 of the 27 senior players on the books at Stamford Bridge have fewer than 3 years remaining on their contracts. And those 3 are Thiago Silva, Conor Gallagher and Ian Maatsen. Chelsea are treating both, this being Conor Gallagher and Ian Maatsen, as open situations. So it is impossible to rule out one or both players signing new deals or being sold in January. That would be a particularly startling outcome in the case of Gallagher, who is a key starter for Pochettino and the on-field captain when Reece James and Ben Chilwell are injured. I mean, there isn't a lot to say about this. I mean, it's absolute madness with Conor that there's even the chance of him leaving in January, given what we have seen so far this season and what he has offered. I remember in the summer, many people commenting on my shows when I suggested that Conor Gallagher should be given a second season. That's just a nonsense. He should absolutely be sold. He's proved a lot of those people wrong. Hopefully changed the minds of people. He has played every game from Mauricio Pochettino, and his performances, I think, along with Cole Palmer, who of course arrived a little bit later, has been Chelsea's best player so far this season. I think it's undeniable when you look at his influence, when you look at just his level of performance, and also the way he's matured as a player in that role for Pochettino and taking the armband and looking so confident with it. It's just ridiculous that Chelsea could still be in a situation of losing him midway through this season. And In the case of Ian Maatsen, I mean, he's barely got into the first team. I mean, maybe that situation changes very quickly. I mean, a month ago, would any of us have said that Marc Cucurella was going to be close to the Chelsea first team? None of us, I think, would. Things change very quickly in football, but I think for Ian Maatsen, that one feels a little bit more getting close to the exit door, and I think he'd have many suitors in January. In the case of Gallagher, it should be a no-brainer in terms of nailing that guy down for a long-term contract because he's such a wonderful talent. The Athletic also reported around Jadon Sancho. So this is a long read, and it's more to do with the situation. Laurie Whitwell, I believe, who's a Man United reporter, wrote this. And it's an interesting piece if you want to learn about where Jadon Sancho is now, the lack of good training from Jadon Sancho. But this is regarding his potential exit in January and where he could go. So this is what the report says. United made inquiries with other clubs, including Dortmund, in the summer, but nothing came to fruition. And it is understood the Bundesliga team are not looking to do a deal for him in January. For all his brilliant performances in Germany, oversleeping and timekeeping were issues at times there too. Juventus have been linked with an approach, and some in the industry believe Sancho's connections to London, the city he grew up in, make Chelsea a possible option. Any move would need Sancho's agreement, and as Ten Hag has discovered, getting that can be easier said than done. This feels like a silly season again, and Sancho, it just is a little bit of a throwback link, to be honest, because I remember when he was at Dortmund 2019, 2020, around that time, he was one of the big names being linked. I remember it was the summer before we signed Werner and Havertz, that from Bundesliga talents, like he was the one that many people wanted to see, and it felt like it was going to be between Chelsea and Man United, and so many people wanted to see Sancho come to Stamford Bridge. And given what's happened at Old Trafford, and given the way his career has gone since then, and he hasn't adapted to life in the Premier League, Man United is a bit of a basket case like Chelsea. And I also think that we don't need another wide player. Like, how many more wide players do you need? We've got Cole Palmer now, who's playing an integral role. You've got Raheem Sterling, who's playing well. You've got Mykhailo Mudryk. You've got Noni Madueke, who in himself isn't playing a lot of football. So there's a sign of the issue there that I have touched on before about cluttering in an area. And we'll move on to this with the final part of today's show in terms of where that key January target could be in the position, because I think it's quite obvious. Maybe two, actually. But the idea that Sancho, for that money, for the problems he's had, and in comparison to what we currently have within our squad, that we should be going anywhere near him. I'm not suggesting that Sancho is a busted flush. He's someone that can't go somewhere and excel, or maybe even Man United still find his way there. But I don't see the excitement. I don't see people making an argument that, yeah, we absolutely have to go and get Jadon Sancho, because he just hasn't thrived at Man United, and there's a lot of problems there, and I think there would be better use of our transfer funds if we are going to spend it in January. So this gets onto the final story. Miguel Delaney, he goes on to say that in terms of the process, the Argentine will have a final say on any purchases after a collaborative process with the recruitment team, which includes co-sporting directors Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, and co-director of recruitment and talent Joe Shields. The model is described as more like Man City's, where the manager will identify the type of tactical profile he needs, then the staff come up with suitable names, and the manager then decides on who to go for. Chelsea are expected to be one of the clubs that go for Brentford's Ivan Toney in the window, as a number 9 would still be preferred. This gets to it, right, in terms of where Chelsea will be focusing in January, and it's obviously striker. And we spoke about Victor Osimhen, we spoke about Ivan Toney. I really like Ivan Toney. I still think the big question mark over that is how a player recovers and responds and returns after a period of isolation, really, from football, and given the problems that may come from that. But if we're just looking at his talent, if we just look at the evidence of what he's done when he's been on the pitch in recent years, brilliant player. And he's clearly someone that the club, I mean, we've heard so many noises, they may feel it's the right time to move. And it would kind of break this model, actually, of only signing players under the age of 24 and 25, because Ivan Toney's 27. So pushing for one of those more experienced players that people like and people would want to see in the team, and clearly has goal scoring pedigree within the Premier League. And in terms of, I did speak about this and was a little bit dismissive over the way it was reported by Fabrizio Romano. This gives it more context and more detail that I think sums up the importance here. And you know, because a few weeks ago, Fabrizio Romano was reporting Pochettino is going to have now all this power and final say. When you actually break it down like this, I think it's a lot more collaborative and a lot more sensible from the club. If this is the case of you have a tactical profile that Pochettino wants, you get a list of players and then Pochettino decides who to go for. That feels very modern. That feels suitable. And it isn't just specialist players that the individual coach likes. Like this individual player, he's going to request a certain profile. That makes a lot more sense to me, rather than we go for a series of players that have only worked with the coach before. I think that makes a lot more sense because, of course, if you're going to invest in a head coach, you want to have that collaborative feeling, but you've also got to be aware of a case where the current head coach can't be a dictator. You can't have a squad molded just by players the current head coach likes. And if you sack that head coach, you're screwed for the long term and you have to rebuild your whole squad again. Chelsea have had that problem. I get the sense that Man United is still going to have that problem given some of the players Ten Hag has signed. So I like this idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. And Ivan Toney, I mean, I've said before, I do like the idea of Nicholas Jackson or Armando Broja being given time. And actually in recent weeks, and I said this in Added Time on Monday, with the way the midfield's worked, Nkunku actually now is going to be competing maybe for one of those front three spots rather than you have a 4-2-3-1 with one less central midfielder. So then that in itself brings up another question. I also think we've got AFCON coming up the start of 2024, where it looks like Nicholas Jackson is going to be the likely player out of the Chelsea squad to be involved with, of course, Senegal. And that may make the signing of Ivan Toney in January even more important. But that is it for this news video. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Please give us 5 stars if you're listening on the podcast. That is the appropriate number of stars for Son of Chelsea. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.